a computer.
All right. But no more political jokes. Can we know more ex-presidential, US presidential jokes?
You can try. Well, officially, kia ora, welcome everybody to New Zealand and Sydney and Australia. Really happy that there are so many joining from all around the world to Troy's meetup today, our meetup, and Troy's our speaker or presenter, facilitator. We will see how we go as the people are joining. We're 34 at the moment. And so it's around coaching with data today. Troy is, I'd say, the data geek in the Kanban community. So anything data, you can ask him. He's really good at that. And we're really happy to have him here today. Hello, Troy. And before we are heading, sorry, maybe just Daniel, do you want to also say a few words from our big brother in Australia?
Yeah, so welcome to everyone, especially from Australia, and those links that we've got from around the world through the Kanban community that we've created. So welcome. So I've got the Melbourne Kanban group and the Sydney Limited Whip Society meetup attendees joining today. So welcome to everyone from there. And there's going to be lots happening in the world of Kanban this year. You've probably seen some of the meetups that are coming up. For those that are on the meetup groups, I put out a mail out this morning talking about some of the things that are coming up this year. We'll probably do another Kanban unconference thing because I'm quite aware that we don't have that personal face-to-face contact. And although it's awesome having folks from all over the world like Troy that can actually come and talk to us, it's actually nice to be able to talk to each other as well. So we'll have a bit of a balance as we do the meetups throughout the year to make sure that, you know, the community itself is, you know, got lots of different outlets to explore Kanban and the ideas around it. Thanks, Silke.
Yeah, awesome. And so if you are interested in Kanban trainings or coaching, Dan's your go-to person, New Zealand, that's me. And I guess with that, I'll hand over to Troy on data-driven coaching, team metrics that don't suck.
Yes. And as is my way, I'll start with someone else's slide deck. Larry Mascheroni, I don't know how many of you have ever sort of been to his conferences. He's a speaker here in the US. I don't think he's been to the Australian sort of conferences at all, but he should be a speaker you get in, and I'll put in a good word for you. He's pretty, yeah, he's moved into the security area, but back in the day, Larry and I, we used to rabble-raise a lot of work around Agile, and he has a talk that you should go to the YouTube video and look for the impact of Agile quantified. And it was a piece of work that he did while he was at a company called Raleigh at the time and Carnegie Mellon University that was going to be part of his sort of doctoral thesis. But what he really sort of did was take on looking at 10,000 projects that were in Raleigh, which was a software tool of choice for managing work back when I was a youngster. It's been acquired now by a couple of companies, so it's no longer what you would expect. But what he set out to do was look at the folklore of Agile and try and understand whether what we were doing in Agile had any scientific basis whatsoever, which is interesting, right? Because we go around coaching and someone sort of says, so you say so, and then we wanted you to be able to point to something sort of saying, not just me, so do those attractive, good-looking people called Troy and Larry. And that's what he set out to do. So what sort of practices was he looking at sort of trying to prove? Iteration length. All right. I know this is a Kanban sort of centric sort of one, but looking at when we did batch sort of work in iteration length, what did the industry most commonly use? Well, the industry as a Scrum world seemed to pretty much settle on sort of 2-week sprints. And was that the right number of weeks to settle on? How do we tell? So what he did was he come up with a way of summing correctly 4 different types of measures to sort of determine where higher is better across those 4 measures. And the 4 measures he had was productivity, predictability, responsiveness, and quality. And what he decided was that out of all the measures that were available, if we picked one in each of these and we correctly summed them together, what do we get? And as you can sort of see, higher is always better in the software development performance index, is what he created here. You'll see that 2 weeks across all 4 of the measures did sum to a higher value. There was some evidence that 2-week batches of work in the type of work that was recorded in Rally, which was a Scrum tool, of course, did give the biggest bang for the buck. And that's what he really sort of invented there, was sort of what were the right performance measures that equate and all have to be true to be best. Because in absence of that, people will just want throughput or velocity to be high. Absent of that, people will just want cycle time to be low. But there are ramifications in optimizing for one of those 2 metrics. If you just optimize for throughput alone, bad things could happen. If you optimize for cycle time alone, bad things could happen. If you're optimizing for and we'll look at some examples later on, but in essence, what he did come up with was this software development performance index. Has anyone heard of this before? Yep, Daniel has. Yeah, okay. So you all knew it already. So what he did was he went through, out of the couple of hundred possible measures, he just picked 4 that were available in the data, which he could combine together, and then started looking at what that would mean. And then there's some future ones which he didn't do. So, essentially what he looked at was, he took the raw metrics and come up with a way of looking at combining them using percentiles, which are additive. So the best in the data set that he had got 100%, and the worst got 0%, and everyone was scaled between those 2 across the 4 measures, which meant you could sum together the 4 measures and make them higher is generally better within their category, within their measurement dimension. Long story short, this is how you actually combine different measures together safely, and it's how you get insight into understanding for different categories of different practices are being used by different teams in those, can we measure a difference between them? And that's what he sort of looked at. So iteration length, yes, we saw that 2 weeks was best overall across all 4 measures, but the story isn't as simple as that. Because sometimes not all of these measures are equally important in context. For instance, if you wanted to productivity, if you wanted to sort of ship the most work over time, it's best to do 1-week sprints or use Kanban and don't do sprints at all. That will give you the maximum number of items delivered, the highest throughput or the highest velocity, depending on whatever your drug of choice is. So if we just looked at productivity from just a single measure perspective, we can be misled, because we would have made a decision here to tell the team to use 1-week sprints. Science proves it. But quality, 4-week sprints was best, because quality in the measure here was escape defects. And it turns out that within a week, people were coding, but not really getting a chance to spot and run the right test to find defects that would eventually be found. So if you just look at the quality measure, you would have said, let's do 4-week sprints. So anyway, he did some work there, and everyone says, well, that's great, but how do you know it's true? Well, out of the 10,000 projects, some teams went from 2-week sprints to 3-week sprints, and some teams went from 3-week sprints to 2-week sprints. It was the late 90s. You could do what you wanted with impunity. So teams were using 3-week sprints. It wasn't a Fibonacci number they liked, but off they went. So all I bring up Larry's work to show is that across multiple dimensions, performance is viewed differently than looking at individual measures of teams. And when we're coaching using data, it's just like our job is to make sure that teams are good across multiple dimensions, not just excellent at any one. And believe me when I sort of say, the moment that you put a chart up on the wall in a team retrospective, in a big screen TV, should we ever in the US ever work in the same building again, whenever you put a chart up somewhere, actually showing that data is going to change behavior. And coaching using data means helping teams understand how to avoid that overreaction to seeing data or making a dumb choice based on trying to optimize a single measure rather than sort of just one. So, you know, Larry's work, and I'll let you Google his slides, the impact of Agile quantified. You know, he looked at co-location. All right, does that matter? Anyone think co-location matters? Because we're sort of proving it wrong now, aren't we? But, you know, what we looked at was that, you know, in the same building, didn't have as the best productivity happened when people were distributed in the same time zone. So where we said they had to be right next to each other in desks, the data didn't sort of prove that point very well. Sure, they could have been doing it poorly and they didn't have good coaches like you, but you know, we had evidence early on that the world wouldn't end if we ever were unable to work in the same physical space. So, you know, time zone mattered. So crossing time zones was a big issue, and you know, we don't have the data to know, but you know, we got some guesses that, you know, when you're in a building together, often it means that you get drive-bys and unplanned work, and people tell you. So there is some benefit to only being available by Zoom and Slack, which you can mute. Any questions on this so far? Anyway, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I am going to.
Troy, there is one question. How much data did you collect to calculate the index shown?
So there was 10,000 different projects that were compared against each other. So these are the sum totals across 10,000 projects. So were they all well run? No, they weren't. And one thing you will sort of see when you get in and look at these, let me show you how this works, is see these bars, see the overlap in them. So even with 10,000, you know, the best team here did better than the 1 week sprints. And the worst team here, you know, did sort of worse than the 1 week sprints, even though the average across all 10,000 was in the middle. So your mileage varies, okay? So what the intention of this piece of work was to just see, was there any evidence that the default choices that Agile has adopted and said was necessary, co-location's necessary, 2 week sprints are necessary, was there any science behind them? And the reason you know that this is going to be accurate is because he did one based on geography. So let me show you this one. And now, so if you don't believe it, Australia and New Zealand.
They're awesome.
The world. So of other projects in the Australian and New Zealand segment did best overall across all of the others. And of course, there was some specific differences in Israel, and there were some specific differences in India, and you could see it. You could actually spot the way these things were oscillating between the two. So you know, what we found was that yes, you could actually see evidence of team size. This is the one I like to. This is the one that everyone gets emotional about. 7 plus or minus 2, does it matter? It varies. So you got to work out here what is the important dimension that makes sense in your context, because Across all 4 measures, yes, 5 to 9 is the size of the team that gave the best sum across all 4 measures. But it wasn't best in any individual one. For instance, if just getting throughput performance again was important, less than 3 people was the right number. So a smaller team delivered more items faster. The predictability, 9 to 15 was more predictable than 5 to 9. Well, you can sort of guess that when there's a smaller teams mean one person being out on the surfing trip to Bali actually had a bigger impact on the team than it did actually the larger teams could absorb more people having to homeschool their kids during pandemics, right? There was more ability for the team to absorb negative factors. But the main one is that quality. I don't know why it says performance. That should say quality. His deck has an error in it on the quality metric, no less. So in the quality metric here, you'll sort of see that 5 to 9 had the least escape defects, but you'll see that the less than 3 scored worst on quality. Why? You got less people looking at stuff. You probably got less people who are really good at testing just as well as good as coding and using databases and so forth. So there isn't one performance measure that actually represents the right choice for a team. If you were building pacemakers, please use a team who has at least 5 to 9 people on it to make sure that you nail quality. If it's delivering pizzas, please make sure that you have a smaller amount of teams. But the point is, it's almost indistinguishable between 3 to 15 people. So we make a big thing that's got to be 7 plus or minus 2. It really doesn't have that big an impact. And I'm going to say this and you're going to yell at me. By going to smaller teams, we often increase dependencies between those teams. And dependencies crater every single one of these measures because it sits idle, waiting for another team to pick it up and so forth. So whereas we get about a less than sort of 5% difference in performance with a team of 15, I would going to more people on the team if I could eliminate even a single dependency inside an organization. And I know that sort of makes me an outlier. Happy to be one. But we got to start the conversation around there as well. If we just do organizations and reorgs and keep small teams, but increase dependencies across the organization, that may not be the droids we're looking for. We might need to rethink that strategy a bit more. But main point I wanted to show this was the fact that yes, Australia and New Zealand, because they're the same country, did best overall, and all the other countries did sort of worse. All right. You still with me? Anyone hanging up? Anyone leaving?
Country smiles. Troy, are you going to share the slides?
I will not share Larry's slides. They're his slides, but I will say that if you Google for the impact of Agile quantified, you will see videos of him presenting it, and he's far better than I am. And you will sort of see all of his slides downloadable from a lot of conferences. So Google the impact of Agile quantified. Make sense? All right. Now, what I decided to do was not have one slide deck. I decided to have 3 in a Miro board just to make it super hard for you to follow along. So I'll make my decks available for sure. They're already out there, but I will be referencing sort of different decks on the way through here. Some ground rules. Coaching using data. There are just 5 rules that you just can't break. And I know that I sort of say that one thing you should never do is say you should never break these rules. You should never break these rules. And so everything else I say, you need to work out what's contextually right for you. These 5 things are just clearly dumb and destroy data no matter what you do. First one is that the quickest way to get crappy data is to embarrass people. And you sort of say, well, how does that happen? I worked at a company who was in data visualization, and I come down the stairs into where my little cubicle was, and in the big screen TV in the kitchen was a list of developers by name and the number of bugs open against them. So you could work out who the worst programmer to the best programmer was, because the worst programmer, of course, had more defects against them. What happened? Well, if they were your friend, you stopped logging defects against them. You put a Post-it note on their monitor. If you didn't like them, you logged it 3 times using slightly different grammar. So the point was that the people who were getting bugs assigned to them were the longest serving people there, because they were the last people to touch code, or they were the experts in an area and it was a particularly difficult bug to solve. So after working there for 15 years, they just accumulated a lot of open defects that either were too low to fix or never prioritized or triaged, but this dashboard made them cower in fear. And the point was that what happened was the company was looking at, we must have 0 defects. Quality is all important. But all they really achieved was the inability to know how many defects there were, because it was so confronting to have your name on that chart day in, day out, that people worked around it. They just didn't log it. So the moment that you make people get embarrassed using data is the moment that you lose data that you expected to make a decision with. So you can't do that. You've got to find a way of not making people feel embarrassed about data. And I'll show you how to do that. One of the ways of doing that is that we're not interested in the values of an individual number ever. We're interested in trends over time. Because an individual value that's stable is less worrying than a metric which is cratering. And we see this happen, right? I mean, the best team, to say we were just measuring them on throughput, they might be doing 100 items, and then they were doing 80 and 60 and then 50 and 40. And then there's another team that's doing 5, 15, 20, 25. Well, the team that's doing 40 is obviously better than the team doing 25, right? Even though the team that's now doing 50 was doing 100 a few weeks ago. They're the ones that need the coaching intervention. The team that's slowly increasing just has fewer people on the team, or different sized items that are slightly larger and they need to get done. So you can tell nothing from a single number. You can only tell something from a trend and a change over time. And that's a great way of making people feel safe with the data, because they feel like more of the story of how they're improving over time, but they're not there yet, isn't going to be sort of get a nasty gram email from the VP sort of saying, you suck, you're only getting 40 things done per week. Yeah, but we were only getting 10 things done 2 weeks ago. So I think we're doing pretty well. Thank you very much. So that's what we want to be able to do. Now, the other part of it that is that you've got to have something to compare against. Now, trends naturally compare against prior periods, so they satisfy this criteria as well. But you don't go, if you were delivering oranges, but it was the amount of weight per orange, and also you were selling watermelons, you'd feel pretty stupid sort of saying, take back all your oranges, they're way underweight. But we compare watermelons and oranges in our agile world all the time. And I see it. The moment that you compare team A versus team B, team A's velocity, team A's throughput versus team B's throughput or velocity, or their cycle time between teams, the reason you can't and shouldn't compare teams against each other is because you don't know the team context. They break work down separately. They've got different pressures. Someone's working on a legacy system and someone's working on a brand new React sort of system. You cannot tell anything about comparing data when you don't understand the context it was collected on. Because if we can't compare it in context, we cannot show unusual. And it's not good or bad in our world. What we should be looking for is unexpected. unusual. Snow in Alaska at this time of year during winter is not surprising. Snow in LA still is surprising. Well, snow at the equator is surprising no matter what season you're in. So you've got to be able to have a look at that. And the real context of this talk is around, you've got to balance your metrics. You've got to avoid over-focusing or focusing people on a single metric. And that's what we really just chatted about, why I introduced the Software Development Performance Index, because it gave the first sort of 4 metrics that we wanted to look at. Now, I have a free tool for this. It's a simple spreadsheet out there. I'll put the link in there. It's free. There's nothing here that's sold. You put in a completed date, you put in a started date, and you put in a type of work. And what it does is it goes and builds you that Software Development Performance Index dashboard that you saw before. It has a quality dimension, has a productivity dimension, has a responsive dimension, and has a predictability dimension. And how have I made it safe? All right. Anyone any observations you notice about these charts?
No people's names.
There's certainly no names. It's all done at a team level. You put your team in.
A little bit all over the place.
A little bit, but there's no y-axis. And the numbers in the detail are too small for people my age to see.
Rob said there is no use of the color red.
That's right. There's orange and blues to account for people of my age as well. So it's a lot of my age here. I've tried to make everything focus you on the trends here. I put a trend line on. I've made them so that most of the measures they're all over time. I extended the trend line out a bit. I left the y-axis off because the numbers matter less than the trend that you have.
Yeah, that's what Paul and Tim said that kind of as well. No y-axis, focus on trends over absolutes is what Paul says, and Tim says, so the charts focus more on trends.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I want you to sort of think about is that for a team, what we're trying to do is have them spot an adverse trend somewhere. I mean, this group doesn't really have one, but you know, you're trying to coach your teams to make smart trades between these dimensions. Now, in the early days with Larry's work, he focused on do it right, the quality dimension, a do it fast, a speed dimension, a do lots, some measure of quantity, and a do it predictably, some consistency sort of measure. So they're the 4 Software Development Performance Index ones that you saw earlier. And then over time, what got recognized, I'm sure Larry did as well. It was coming up on the research he was going to do, but it's certainly in our world. You could do all of those 4 things, you could nail them all, but not do the right stuff. You could just cherry pick items from a backlog that were really small and easy to do, that didn't give customer value, and get really good throughput, really good cycle time. You could do them consistently because you're just doing small items all the time. And because they were easy, you're not going to have any defects in them. But you weren't going to deliver customer value, as much customer value as you could or should. So we added another one called the do the right stuff metric, some measure of value. And don't get me wrong, I really dislike people. I really prefer numbers and data and spreadsheets over people. So I'm not that sort of soft, touchy-feely sort of coach. The pandemic has not affected me at all in my work or life. I never went out before, and I still don't go out. But there's a metric of the ability for a team to be happy and to be able to continue doing what they're doing, which is a very under-measured dimension, the ability to keep doing it, sustainability. So if we're working our teams to midnight, or if we're working our teams on weekends, or if we're constantly pushing more work on them than they could ever possibly achieve, then what's going to happen is all of these other measures make no sense and they're meaningless. They're completely unpredictive of anything in the future because the team's about to collapse. If you're working people so hard or you're treating them so poorly that they leave, none of these metrics matter because the trend that you had will not be the trend that you're going to have in the future. It's going to crater. You're going to get more defects because you've got newer team members and you're constantly training people, so you're moving slower, right? So propeller head geeky guy here is telling you that you've got to, if you can do one measure first, find a measure that is something about the team's ability to continue doing what it's doing in the future. I called it resilience here. I really should have called it sustainability. Is the team operating in a sustainable way? Because until you can understand that metric, it doesn't matter what you measure anywhere else because you don't know that it's going to stay that way in the future. So there you go. I said it. You got to find a way of coaching and measuring your teams to deliver it in a sustainable way as your first metric dimension that you nail. Now, I'm so bad at this stuff that I left it blank and I put it last. But I do say that you should do it. So give me some credit for it. I don't know how to measure this very well. I ran a weekly survey, random survey of the team, anonymous survey that sort of says, give us a rating 1 to 10, whether you think we can do next week what we did last week. Something that sort of allows the team to move a meter to the right if they think that they're working in an unsustainable way. And that is an early warning sign that you should expect these other metrics to change, not based on the team suddenly becoming stupid. It's that you're managing them poorly and they're unable to do what they were able to do before. So there's a lot of value in finding a way of getting some sustainability metric going. The real reason I didn't do that is that I wanted to keep it really simple on data capture here. And the only data you put in is the completed date, the start date, and a type of work. Is it planned, unplanned? Is it a defect? Is it a story? Is it a task? Is it value? Is it not value? I don't care what you put in there. But I just wanted to see how many charts I could build using those three measures. And it turns out quite a few. It turns out that, you can do histograms, you can do scatter plots, you can do cumulative flow diagrams, you can do, sort of box plots about cycle time, variability, and so forth. You can do a lot of stuff. And I don't yet know what data I need to add to get a sustainability metric and a value metric in here. But you can, and you should. That's a matter of urgency. So anyway, this spreadsheet's just called Team Dashboard. I'm not good at naming things, so it's just called Team Dashboard. I'll make sure you get the link to it. You just download it. There's no macros. It's just a pure spreadsheet. Has some other charts I like. This one's particularly good after a couple of glasses of wine. It just shows WIP over time and the age of that WIP. It doesn't require you to have a heap of data to actually build a lot of chart types. In fact, completed date, start date, and the type, some type descriptor is pretty much universal in whatever work tracking tools, because it's not singular, your companies are utilizing. So I find no matter what tool I go into an organization with, I can get these three elements of data and paste them into here. And do. So there's a team dashboard spreadsheet for you. Use it, don't use it, I don't care. Understand what I am saying though is that if you're just going to put up throughput, or if you're just going to put up cycle time and show that data to a team, it will have an impact on that team's behavior. You need to understand what's going to get screwed up. And that is what I want to spend some time doing. Now, in the chat window, I did put a Miro board. Where's my chat go? All right. Oh, there it is. All right, so there's the Miro board. Oh, thanks.
Hang on.
Now,
there is some questions going on in the chat at the moment.
oh, God help us. Okay.
So there is Ankita who said she's used it before, but she thinks she's actually overcomplicated it a bit, and it seems to be a lot easier than she thought. Paul says value from the art of business value by Mark Schwartz, just as a comment. And then there is actually a question from Daniel. When I read the example data tab, teams can choose only one type like story or defect. Is this correct that teams work only on one of these types? Mostly teams work on different types by percentage, e.g. 60% is story, 20% is defect.
Yeah, sure. You can have as many types as you want in your data. In fact, I've just done 2 or 3 in there because lack of imagination. You can have any number of types as you want there. What ends up happening is the only change you have to make is you just got to populate the ones you want them to choose in the settings tab. So see the card type filter list. If I put in widgets here, and I got to put it in twice because I just wanted to make sure you spelt it correctly. I don't know why I did that, but in the team dashboard now, what that allows you to do is see this work type filter. You can start just filtering by widgets or just filtering by a certain type of work. And remember I said one of the commandments was to compare apples to apples. You must and should look at this data on different work types. So that is the, so you can have I think I left you room to have it with 10 different ones that you can filter on. You can have as many as you want, but you sort of, the way this filtering works, it's just a spreadsheet, go and hack it, okay? So don't sort of blame me for this. And the only other thing about types that matters is, again, just because it's simplicity, you got to pick one type of work that you're going to have as your quality dimension. So whether that's the defect dimension or bug or whatever it's going to be in your system, you got to pick one, and everything else is deemed to be not bugs, not defects. And that solely is so that the this defect percentage rate chart can be built. So long story short, you can have as many work item types in there as you want. The drop down just gets driven by what's in the settings. And you can sort of come here and filter because there's no widgets in the data, so it's going to sort of do that. But if I did just come in here and I just pick defects, it's also going to look weird because it's or it just won't work. Let me just go back to all temporarily. The filtering, this will filter these charts to just the type that you choose, should there be one entry of it in there. And the only other thing this spreadsheet allows you to do is have up to 10 different sort of sets of data. I call them examples because I use this for training, but you can have all the different teams in here and have up to 10 sort of extra sets of data. And then you can choose what team you get there. Anyway, this talk isn't about this sort of spreadsheet. I have a training session that's coming up that's in Asian time zone this time of night, in a bit earlier actually, that I offer to try to tell you how to hack this spreadsheet to do anything you want to do. But what this tonight's session is about is understanding that you can't and shouldn't just measure one dimension if you're going to coach teams effectively using data.
By the way, there are lots of really useful sheets that Troy has made open source on his webpage. Worthwhile having a look at that. Troy, I've got another question from Dirk. What do you think about the state of Devops metrics, lead time, deployment frequency, mean time to restore and change fail percentage compared to the SDPI's 4 metrics?
We're being recorded, aren't we? Yeah, I
Shout out.
I like their approach. Their approach was that one metric isn't enough, that you have to balance sort of certain metrics. There's another problem with metrics sometimes, that you measure what's available rather than what you could or should measure. So, you know, none of those metrics individually are terrible. So if you're not measuring anything at all, they're a pretty good starting point. But remember, they chose those metrics to prove some hypothesis they had around what it takes to get teams to deliver well at a DevOps sort of perspective. Because it comes in the State of DevOps report, and that report was sponsored by a company which did, release automation tools. So the metrics they chose really made a good narrative around why release automation makes good sense. Just like Rally's SPDPI metrics were chosen to make it sound like using tools to manage software development and items were the right things to do. So they both have their weaknesses based on that they both come from corporate cultures and survey-based, like instruments that the hypotheses weren't naive. They had an agenda behind the metrics they chose. Because, I mean, I'm sure you could find a case where a company which didn't do multiple releases per day was outperforming somebody on the market which just released once every 6 months. So those teams, they're just not in a context or a market segment that's going to benefit from all those metrics. So I stick clear of choosing which metrics to work with, and say that whatever framework you're going to use for doing metrics, pick a measure from each of these 6 dimensions. And I almost do not care which metric you use. It is far less important to me what metric you use, as long as you have a metric from each of these dimensions. Otherwise, you could be causing harm somewhere and not know it. So I could map the State of DevOps report to 4 of these, and I can map STDPI to 4 of these. So they both aren't terrible. They're both going to outperform having a single metric. Do I like the specific metrics in both of them? No, I don't. I think some of them are overcomplicated and just generally available and have some reason that prove a hypothesis that the company who was sponsoring the study wanted it to prove. It's very well done work. I just don't like saying that you should just use someone else's metrics like that. I think you need to think about it a bit more in your context. Is that an undiplomatic answer, or?
I found it as diplomatic as you can be.
Yeah.
It's good.
So would I use them out of the box? No, I wouldn't. But do I think they're on the right track? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
And do I think that they're better than what you're probably using now if you don't have anything? They certainly are.
Yeah.
But you can do better.
Cool. And I think we need to be critical about metrics anyway, generally, because using metrics for the sake of metrics, I think all of those that are here agree that this doesn't really work. Hey, Paul, you had some comments. Do you want to unmute and maybe comment on that on your own? Because there were a few of you now, and I'm not sure if they're just thoughts or questions. Paul Salmon. No, is he still here? He is.
He's gone to have a drink. Driven him to drink. What was the gist of them? Was there a specific one that
It was like, what did he say? We need to work to articulate value and make it visible and ideally comparable. COD, I think that's cost of delay, reserve, like the safe measure, you know.
Yeah.
How you want
Weighted short-term cost.
Yeah. The
Yeah, so
mark.
you might be able to hear me now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so my main point there was you talked about doing the right stuff, and it's hard, right? And so we need to find ways to articulate it, and it's individual to an organization, which makes it harder. And you know, some of the tools like cost of delay help to put a number on things, make them comparable, but it's all hard. And then later on, I was talking a bit more about the Devops metrics, and I think some of it is the deployment frequencies, kind of your time to market and your feedback cycles. That's one of the benefits of that, is getting feedback from your customers. And then the other one is the lead time from code commit to deployment. And that to me is about, we often try to optimize the whole development process, but a lot of that is thinking time. And we don't want to optimize how fast you solve a problem, because that you'll solve the wrong problem or solve it wrongly. But after we commit code, shrinking the time until you get to production, again, helps your feedback cycle. Anyway, that's just my take on why I like those, but I agree that be all and end all of metrics.
Yeah. They're both valid points, and yeah, I agree. All right.
Cool. I think the others were more comments and adding to what you've already said. So we have 40 minutes left, and I think you wanted to go to Miro, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind it if that's okay.
Yeah.
I
I'll repost the link.
Got it. You got it there. And we're going to do sort of a group exercise, but I'm also going to do one here on the main group, so that if you don't want to do it, participate, that's completely optional. Silky, 4 random groups when you get a chance. Don't start them just yet, but that's going to be the next thing I'm going to ask to do. Now, if you're using Miro, one of the things to make sure you turn on, see this little bottom left-hand frames button? If you put that on, you get this little slide out. When you start it, it's at the most inconvenient view possible, but you can actually put it on this little list view. I'm going to refer to this as frame number, frame number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Now, one of the things I want you to think about in your organizations about before you even start sort of charting data, about which data you're going to chart and whether to use any of those sort of metrics we looked at before, is that there's really 3 phases of work that the items can be displayed at. We can display data about choosing what work to do, planning. We can show data about tracking work once it's started, in progress work, status and so forth. And then we can also look at data about measuring the impact of past work that we've done, and using that as that feedback loop that you just mentioned to actually change our plans about what we're going to do based on what we're going to get it. So what I've got here in this little first exercise is for each person, and when I send you to the group 1 will go to group 1, so frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, frame 4. I'm going to go and work on group 5 myself. So if you don't want to join a group, you can just stick around and we'll do it together. We'll have a great fun time. But what I want you to do is, for each of those phases, I've given you 2 sets of icons you can drag. And I want you to sort of roughly guess at the moment where your company currently invests in an area. So how much investment do they put into planning? Is it a little, is it some, or is it a lot? And then the second question is, grab your second sort of icon there. For each of these 3 phases, I want you to think about, if we were to improve data in this area, we were twice as good at it, what impact would we have on the customer? Almost none to a game changer. So I want you to spend sort of just 2 to 3 minutes in the group there, for each person in the group, just write your name on a Post-it note. And then you've got two sets of voting shapes. And I want you to use the first set on the first question and the second set on the bottom question. So there'll be, for each person, there will be the three shapes up on this one and the three shapes on this one, answering the question that you see. Does that make any sense at all? What I want you to do is I want us to see where we're actually investing now and where you would actually get the biggest bang for the buck if you did invest. For the people who don't want to do the exercise real time, I will be over in group 5. The groups are 1 to 4. You can do what you want to do. I'll start a timer here and just spend, let's say, 4 minutes.
Give me one sec, because there are some people who want to be in group 5. I can only assign automatically, so you just turn into one room, or you can stay in the main room. Is the group 5 the main room? That's going to be ours, right?
That's right. So you're just building 4 groups, and if you don't want to join the group that you're assigned to, and you just want to join me on group 5, come along.
So folks, if you don't want to join a room, I think you can just deny that, and then you will automatically be in the main room where we are.
Yep.
Right, I go ahead.
Do it.
You've got the time?
I have. It tended to throw us all into the other room, so we all have to come back. That's new behavior.
I actually was here. I didn't do anything. Maybe because I'm the one that set them up.
Maybe.
I just had that in a meetup like 2 days ago when they sent us into meetup rooms, and I had the opportunity to just refuse.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I thought that'll do the same.
All righty. Hopefully people will get something out of this. All right. So who's with me in this main group? We're all here?
I'm sometimes here, but sometimes I have to handle my kid.
Oh no, that's okay. Yeah, no problem. All right, so I'm still shared. Am I still shared? I'm not shared, am I?
I see you in person. I don't see anything shared.
All right, now you see shared.
Yeah.
All right, so when I run this exercise with teams or companies, what I'm trying to do is get them to understand where they're investing and where they should invest more. So for people planning what work to do in the future, shout out where you think it's not working at all well. So do you see that companies do a lot of catching a lot of data about choosing what to do next, some or a lot?
I'll say a lot from what I've seen. There's usually a fair amount of effort put into kind of planning the next steps.
Got it. All right. Good.
What about? Sorry, Troy. Quick question.
Yep.
I'll put my video on as well. That's to me is a potentially dangerous question, because if they don't know what they don't know and they think they're doing a lot, but in fact they're actually not really, it's a kind of a false scoring.
Yeah, what happens when they put the second one in? I ask them, is it more or less? Because this is what's going to happen now. How much effort do you put in tracking the work that's in progress and status?
So this is the blue one, yeah?
Yeah. it's the one that's tracked most, right? It's the one that you're always looking at on your Kanban boards. It's the cumulative flow diagrams. It's your cycle times. It's your throughput. Is that more? Do you capture and display more data about in progress and completed work, or work that you're planning to do?
Yeah, I would agree with the in-flight stuff is usually a bigger focus on that.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I find. I find that the number one for certainly is the in progress and the completed stuff, not the stuff that you're planning to do. So you still do some analysis about it and you talk about it, but quantitatively, I don't see a lot of quantitative data around planning. Do you agree or disagree, Damon?
Yes, I think you said that you don't see much quantitative data around planning, and I agree.
All right.
It's more subjective. They might have a plan, or there might be some kind of a roadmap, but not much data around planning.
I'm just going to stop that for a second to let people keep going for a second. So what about measuring the past work and quantitative data about the impact on customers? Where would that be? To the left or the right of the triangle?
Probably to the left. It's often talked about, but I think people struggle to actually measure value. I mean, you can get NPS scores with customers and all that kind of stuff, but you've got the notion of we put it out there, but we don't always get the immediate feedback. I mean, as in like, it's not popular yet, but it might be popular in a couple of weeks because there's uptake, or so it's you've got that aspect of delay. Yeah. And then because it's subjective, how do you measure somebody that's at arm's reach who potentially is globally? How do you measure their subjective feeling about something that you've given them?
Yeah, I agree. Silky, could you bring everyone back when you get a chance? All right, is everyone back in the main room? We got everyone back here?
Yeah, I have a question though.
Yep.
Is measuring the impact of past work or past work?
I think it's pesty work, isn't it? Really pesty work.
Yeah.
No, it's past. I think I'm pretty sure it's past work.
Yeah,
underneath.
Past work.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Provide feedback on
because
value.
it looks like pest work, and it certainly was very topical for a team I'm working with now.
Yeah, yeah. That's just me drawing this bloody thing. All right, I'll get better at drawing. I'm sorry.
But you mean past work? Okay.
I do mean past work. Yeah, like the work that's done. Now we didn't get very far on our one. I apologize for our group, but I thought that we would have a look and see what other groups did, just to see where you got. So group one seems like wow, this is unusual. I very rarely see companies saying that they measure the value of work they've done at a customer impact. But good. That's really good to see. This is what I see mostly, is that there's very little work on reflection on work that's been delivered. So that's what this should do, measure the impact of delivered work. I do see mostly the lot of charts and data around tracking work that's in progress or delivered, at a status sort of level. But this is the point I like to see here, that the real game changer would be if we were measuring the impact of delivered work on customers. And the one with the least impact is status. So that was group one. Group two. Yeah, so this is unusual, that you don't have many charts, that someone's saying that they're measuring a lot of work there. All right, anyone from group two? What was the conversation around this? Was that just me Why is this group saying that they really don't track committed work that's in progress?
One of the things we mentioned in our group was there was quite a discrepancy between, depending on the context of the teams. So if we, as an example, if we've already got quite good information, if we've got quite good analytics for question one, then doubling it could potentially be a major step change. But if we've got almost no analytics, then doubling it probably isn't going to have a lot of impact, because double nothing is nothing.
Yeah, got it.
So I think there was a bit there, but yeah, a lot of it came down to, I think that there was some very, very different contexts for each of the teams.
Yeah, I got it. So that's a very contextual one. Yeah, here, this group, very pessimistic. No one did a lot of anything. But the one here that you're sort of saying is that if we could just spend more time planning what work we're going to do, getting some quantitative data around why we should do one feature versus another, that's going to have a big bang for the buck. Yep, someone's saying they're doing a lot here on planning, but and planning and measuring the impact of work delivered. They get they're the game changers. And on my one here, we sort of, this is the pattern I normally see. I normally see that very little is done on getting quantitative data about the impact of what's happening to customers. The most common one I see, there's a lot of charts and status reporting around, based on use of tools, around what's in progress. And the order that I think has the biggest bang for the buck is actually normally something like this. If we were twice as good as measuring status, it probably wouldn't change the world much at all. So I find that whatever we do on metrics and helping the teams, maybe a good place to start is by looking at value and bringing back into the work selection process some quantitative data that's evidence that we actually changed the customer's life at all. And this is getting easier. I mean, there's a lot of, this hasn't been overlooked in the marketplace. So you'll see a lot of tooling around now tracking software that once it's been delivered. But yeah, I find this type of exercise interesting to help people understand that we've got work to do in metrics, even on the value side and the feedback side of the customers. Is there stuff coming into the chat window there? Is it comments? Is it?
Yeah, so Paul said measuring impact of past work is only useful if we still have money to pivot. And then also understanding the problem you want to solve and whether it worked over being on schedule.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So this exercise is far more probably valuable if you're coaching at a team level. And remember, before I gave you those 6 measures: the do the right stuff, the quality, the speed, the resilience. Now, here's what I'm going to say. The metric you choose is actually far less important than actually having a measure in each. I would have done better if I'd locked these, wouldn't it? But I did lock it. It looks locked to me. I don't know why that's movable. I want to just work on this as a group. I'm not going to send you out into separate groups. I want to do this together for the moment.
And just we have 22 minutes left.
Thank you. No pressure. So someone give me a measure on how fast things are done.
Cycle time, throughput.
Cycle time. Okay.
Lead time.
Yep, lead time. Let's put another one in there, lead time.
Throughput. So more volume.
So that's more how much. That's how much
Yeah.
you're doing. It's sort of a delivery rate over time. So this would be throughput.
Flow efficiency.
So flow efficiency. Where does that one fit, do you think?
How well?
I think it's to do with how fast. It's how much, how
It's a
quickly
proxy
you
for
can
how
work on it.
fast. Yeah.
And not how
So-
sustainable. Efficiency,
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah, so it's sustainable is more of is this team's ability to continue at the same pace. So what would be
Predictability.
predictability? So
No, there's something simple like team happiness, team NPS.
yeah, it's staff turnover, team NPS. Yeah, that's actually a good one.
Hours of overtime.
People requesting to leave the team is often good. Now, how well and how valuable and how consistent? So let me just help you with the consistency one. The how consistent is normally some variability on how much. So if the team uses velocity here, not saying that you should, just saying that you can, then what consistency will be, it will be variability of throughput, something like that, right? Because what we're looking at is how much change over time? Is it consistent? Like, do they get 10 done one week, 100 done the next, then 5, then 2, then 10 or 100, whatever. It's how we sort of going there. Now, the hardest ones to do are how well and how valuable, and it's always the case. These two are frightfully hard to do, but I'm going to make it easy for you. The job of these metrics isn't to be the perfect measure of how well or how valuable or how much or how fast or how sustainable. It's to see when you push one of these other ones too fast or too hard. So if we've forced people to just increase throughput, how would we tell? What would be an early warning sign that the team is trying to move too much material too fast?
Defects. Bugs.
Audi.
Yep. And I would sort of say inconsistency.
Yep.
Would you also include reduced customer NPS?
Yeah, that's a great one. Yep, add it. So notice what we're doing here. It now becomes less important what the actual metric is. So would the DevOps metrics be good? Would the cycle time from commit to deployment detect us trying to develop code too fast or too much code and deploy it in too big a chunk? Would it be a good measure to detect that?
I think the combination they used to detect that, and they found the second tier was trying to move too fast, and the defect count increased in the study.
So I think it's a good measure in that case. I think that's a good framework. But it's not that I like the measure; it's that measure was an early warning sign that I could actually detect dysfunction somewhere else.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter what I think about the metric. If it is actually detecting that one of these other measures is being pulled too hard out into the danger zone, it's a good metric. And this is how I facilitate that at a team level. I sort of said, here's the first two, which you think there could never be a case. You can never have too much value. You can never have too much quality. True or false? What if we told the team, do nothing else but worry about customer value?
Tech debt.
So if I said the quality goal was customer net promoter score, and at the moment you had a good net promoter score, what would you do as a team to keep that net promoter score?
Don't change anything.
Yeah, don't change anything.
Exactly. Don't change anything. Shy away from doing any risky feature. So you're in this local optimal zone. So the early warning sign of moving too much focus on NPS, right? So if we put too much focus on it, what ends up happening is we ship nothing. And an early warning sign is we skip P1 items because risk, right? So we're cherry picking through the backlog of things we could do, looking for something that isn't gonna break anything, because heaven forbid we actually affect net promoter score. So what about quality? If we said that quality was the only measure that we worried about, what would be the team's reaction to only worrying about quality?
Speed reduction. Yeah.
You deliver more slowly.
They never release anything.
And the extreme end, you wouldn't deliver anything. If I'm saying that don't introduce defects, there's a great way of doing that. Don't commit any changes, right?
Zero code has the fewest bugs.
That's right. So when that company put that dashboard up in the lunchroom, which sort of made it look like that having a defect was, needed to be sort of hit with a whip at dawn, what they actually did was they actually impacted their cycle time, and they impacted what work was chosen to be done, because no one wanted to, look, I misspelled quality. How cool is that? Freudian slip there. So yeah, so what I want to do is get my teams understanding what the early warning signs are of over focusing on any of these one dimensions alone. So when you're coaching the teams, what you're doing is you're helping them identify and detect that they're being forced down a bad direction behaviorally, which is going to cause you problems in the future. And what you will find is every single one of these good dimensions, you pay a price for if you push too hard or too fast. Now, how do you sort of coach around it? Well, this is a very simplistic one. I asked them, if I told you just to focus on value, what would be the, what would happen? And then now tell me, what are the early warning signs of seeing that happen? So this is a very, very quick way of getting your teams to understand the dynamics between these different dimensions. Now, the professional people do this in a different way. They do this in a way called, anyone heard of Polarity Management? So polarities is a coaching tool used in behavioral sciences, and it works like this. You have, you want to run a marathon, and then what's the inverse of that? You can't run a marathon. But there's two things you could do. You could train and go sort of increasing your endurance, or you could actually sort of rest and let your muscles rebuild. And on each of these, there is a positive aspect of resting, your muscles build. There's a positive aspect of training is that you get increased endurance. But if you overdo any activity, what happens? You get muscle injury. And what that causes is that you get forced into rest. So your muscles sort of rebuild and repair, but then you overdo that side of it and you get into muscle atrophy. And what the behavioral people try and do is, as a coaching mechanism, is help executives not over or underdo any one type of behavior. Giving control, taking control. If you just take control, your staff never learn how to do it themselves. If you give them all the control, they don't have the context of the whole organization that you do. So all these things sound great in isolation, but your job is to help people balance them. And that's sort of what we're doing, is we're helping our teams dampen the amount of time they spend in these negative aspects of it. And the way you do that is you ask them what the early warning signs are of actually spending or entering that negative aspect of doing too much work. So the way I sort of facilitate this is I sort of say, defects, we're going to track escape defects. Tell me the positive result of only focusing on defects. tell me the positive aspect of completely ignoring defects. So on positive aspect of doing escape defects, you get happier customers because it always works. Lower task fixing, you know, there's no prod defects to fix, so we're not getting, our teams aren't being called away. And if we completely ignore quality, shorter release cycles into dev anyway, and faster testing of the beta ideas in the market for faster feedback. So there is a good thing about releasing early, even if you're not certain if it fully works. But on the negatives, you get sad customers or long release cycles. The goal is in helping your teams understand the early warning signs of being in the negative aspects of these. So it's all about helping your teams understand when the early warning signs are too much throughput, too low a cycle time, ignoring value or just choosing the highest value item all the time on the list. There is negative aspects to every one of those. And the job is to help your teams make smart trades between these 6 dimensions, not be brilliant or excellent at one. And that's a very key point. Teams will be strong and weak in these inconsistently. So it's not like you do this in January and that's done for the rest of the year. As they choose new types of work, like implementing a new JavaScript framework, or I don't know, Apple have a new set of requirements for getting your app approved in the store. Different types of work will stress teams in a different way. Pandemics hitting in the US, making everyone work remotely, change the pressure that teams were under about keeping these metrics in a good zone. So if you're coaching that team, what you have to do is sort of saying, what are the early warning signs now that we're not able to work in a sustainable way remotely from each other? And what can we do about it? How will we know when we're paying too high a price for not syncing on Zoom every 6 hours or something like that, right? The conversations are far more important than the numbers. And what you're looking for in the spreadsheet view of the world here, if I should ever find it here, is how that will present itself in this team dashboard, is there will be a declining trend here. See how this team is decreasing the amount of defects that they're dealing with? That may not be anything wrong with that, or it could be that you're forcing the team to only do story work, and there's going to be a big batch of defects coming down the pipeline sometime in the future. So these aren't even good if they're up or down. Sometimes being stable at a consistent rate is what the team needs to do. But it varies on the team. So you cannot look at metrics, even trends of metrics, and say a declining or ascending metric, depending on whether good is bad or where up is good or down is good. They all have the conversation around what we expected it to be and why it wasn't that is far more important than the actual numbers themselves. So that's why the numbers here are almost, I could leave them out and I could coach the team with this equally as well. Because what I'm getting the team to do is seeing that by taking an action or a new process change or getting a new coach in or something like that, has it had the impact we anticipated? And has it caused impact elsewhere we didn't anticipate? And that's what you've got to try and help your team spot. So to do that, I find that the metrics that you choose up here will change over time, because one of them will be a more sensitive measure for a dimension that your team is struggling with at a moment in time. So I'm looking for the measure, which is the early warning sign that, not that this one is good, that moving these other ones hasn't caused this one to do controlled descent into terrain, crater, crash, do something terrible. So when you're looking at your metric selection, it's all around the early warning signs of doing these other ones too aggressively. It's not the best metric for the measure itself, the dimension it is. And that is a really hard thing to get across when I run workshops, is to get people to give up the perfect metric to get just something that is a really good diagnostic tool. And I think that's all I've really got to say on this stuff. You got the Miro link, it's out there. You can use these exercises with your teams. You probably don't need to do the first one. The first one is what I do with management, because I often go into organizations and their only view of metrics is team level metrics. And I have to sort of say, well, if you're not measuring impact on customers, or you're not using that data to drive what features you do next, you might be missing a big opportunity. I use this 6 dimensions to make management realize that it's not just about throughput, it's not just about cycle time, it's about the balance and blend of all these metrics. And I use the bottom one with the teams to help the teams understand how they would sense that one of these other metrics are being pushed too hard, or something's being done behaviorally at a management level, which is just causing rampant destruction of team process.
Awesome, Troy. This is a really good, getting it straight to the point. We've got 5 minutes left, and there have been some discussions going on in the chat. It was more discussions between people helping each other out as you were talking, which is quite nice to see, not really questions. But are there any questions left, or things that people would like to talk out to at right now before we closing?
I have a question. So similar, how do I phrase this? Do metrics change depending on the level that you're looking at? For example, if you're thinking about the strategy level and the whole goal of the company, you have some set of metrics, but as you move more towards team performance or more defined or more granular teams, do those metrics change or need to be adjusted or customized for every team? Or
yeah, the dimensions will not change. The right metric to measure to detect dysfunction does change. So I let the teams choose whatever metric they want to choose in those areas and whatever early warning signs they want to choose, but I make sure they have at least one in these 6 dimensions.
Right.
And that will apply at any level, even strategy. But the item that you're measuring changes as well. Often, like it might be, yeah. So I've been able to, and I don't know whether I'm just forcing a square peg into a round hole because I know it so well. so I use it at all levels, but I don't know whether that's a good idea or not. But in essence, any flow-based system at all in the world, anything that is tracking performance of any manufacturing, construction, or delivery process, these 6 dimensions will apply.
Yep. So Troy, does that, the level that you're at in the organization, will that change the type of metrics that you choose? Because presumably at the higher level, the sample size is going to be a lot lower.
Yeah. So I find higher up, yes, the sample size can be sort of lower, and you're looking at around sort of 7 to 11 samples each time period that you're in. So what happens is to get more data, you expand the time period. So at the executive level and strategy level, they might look quarterly rather than weekly. That's how it tends to change. That you can't sense or get valid information from the data in a shorter time frame. And that's what's sort of happening anyway. That's why we didn't revisit strategy more than once a year often. Why we didn't try for more than quarterly releases and so forth of major features. I think it was because there was an inability to get feedback fast enough to do it. So yeah, but I think someone mentioned earlier there quite wisely that the fast feedback is the issue you're looking for there. And you're looking about sort of 7 to 11 samples of feedback to make a measure in a period reliable enough to be worth plotting. So if you don't get 7 samples with a week, go to 2 weeks. If you don't get it in 2 weeks, go to 4 weeks. If you don't get it in 4 weeks, go to 8 weeks, or go to 3 months, 12 weeks. But you want to try and sort of be at a rough time period that gets you about 7 to 11 samples.
Kieran, did you have a question, mate?
Yeah, I was wondering about finding the right metrics for the right level, because often I'm seeing organizations get swamped in the details. This is like, senior execs asking about story points, just to exaggerate, How do you gauge you've got the right metric for the level you're talking to,
Yeah, the granularity changes. I do this with flight level training, and, like we would sort of roll that up to delivery of features. The rule is that you've got to measure at the granularity where you want to expect the change to occur. So if you're measuring at the executive level, if you want to deliver features faster, but you're just looking at cycle time of stories, it won't work. You got to measure cycle time at the level of features that you want. So, if you've got all this sort of set of Kanban columns and just one develop column, you've got to pick the cycle time and lead time that encompasses all those wait time columns as well, if you want to make an improvement on it. So I find that often the same metric exists, but it will be throughput of features rather than throughput of stories, or throughput of initiatives, or business canvases delivered, or something like that, as the higher level we go. So often you can use the same measures, but a different granularity of item.
Sorry, I was on mute. We are about to run over time, and I've got the feeling that there are no more questions. If there are, I think it's important to just close them off, but I think it's going to forming a nice round picture here.
All right. Now, I know this was a bit random. I tried to just pull together stuff which I think gives you some tools to take away as well. That was the intention. Yeah, and I run training on this stuff, and there's sort of what you just did. I try and do in a day. So trying to fit it into part of an hour and a half was a little bit tough.
Yeah,
so.
It's awesome. And I've actually attended some of Troy's trainings. They're highly recommendable. So you can look them up on his webpage. And also the video will be available on our Kanban New Zealand YouTube channel shortly, if you want to just re-listen to it. And yeah, if you like the thing of a facilitator here is I really have to rewatch it again because there's so much stuff going on around that I have to, so it's going to be there. And if you Google Kanban New Zealand YouTube, you will find it. I will also post it on the meetup. And if Troy, Daniel, is there anything you want to add to finish off this session?
No, it's been fantastic. Thanks very much, Troy. I just also wanted to ask Silke, we don't have March meetup locked in yet, do we?
Mahesh has come back. It will be on upstream Kanban.
Awesome.
And I'm just waiting for his information to put it up there.
Yeah, so there you go, folks, another great session. So Mahesh is with the Swift Kanban company, if you're not familiar with
yeah, so yeah, it'll be on upstream Kanban, portfolio Kanban.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. Anyway, a bit geeky, sorry. Went through it fast. Hopefully you got some of it. Don't measure one thing. If you get nothing else, measure.
It was awesome, Troy, as always. We always love to have you back here. It's always a pleasure. And actually, I had some private messages in the chat as well to say it's just always so. The people had to head back to work over in Europe because they just started, and they were like, it's always so good to listen to Troy. So just passing this on. Yeah. And with this feedback, I guess I'm closing off here. I'll stop the recording.